Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Courage Permission Slip. I, of course, am your host, Kia, and today I have the great pleasure of welcoming a friend, a colleague, a fellow entrepreneur, a kindred spirit, Diane Bradley. And before we dive into today's conversation, let me tell you a little bit more about her. Diane is the Chief Visionary and Growth Maven of the Goodness Collaborative. And 3 years ago, she left a 15-year consulting career to start the Goodness. And she was desiring to build a workplace that more fully supported people like her, a mom, a caregiver, a woman, a first-generation college graduate, all while navigating hashtag all the things. And I know everyone knows what that means. She has a mix of consulting, design, and psychology experience, and she uses a mosaic of these practices in her work every single day. Diane grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, and has called Portland, Oregon, her home for the last 13 years. Welcome, Diane.
Hello, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me, Kia.
Absolutely. It is my pleasure. I'm so happy you are here and that we get to have this conversation. Before we get started, and, obviously you and I have talked about this, but, thinking about your beginnings, you started out in architecture and psychology, two very interesting paths. But, I'm really curious to hear, Diane, given your background and the path that you took, what was the aha moment that led you to realize that it was time for you to leave your consulting career and start the Goodness?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, there's so much to say about this. And in some ways that I feel like that's just one of the many. It feels like that was like a big decision to leave and start this business. And in some ways it still is. And I feel like it was a lot of smaller things that led to that larger thing. And so in some ways it felt like when I finally did leave, it was so much easier than I thought it would be, just because I'd already had to make a lot of smaller choices leading up to that bigger choice. But I think it ultimately, me, Kia, and I strive for different challenges. And so in some ways, consulting is the perfect container for that, because you're always navigating different things, different clients, different opportunities. And that held a lot of weight for me for a long time. And then I think what started to shift that was really having my first daughter and then my second child, and feeling like I found myself in rooms where I felt like, oh, this is really hard for me. Why is that? Like, why does this feel so difficult? And not challenging in like a productive, energizing way, but hard in a grueling, sort of draining kind of way. And I realized like, oh, a lot of these rooms are not built for people like me. I was traveling. I traveled until I was 37 weeks pregnant with both my girls. I was traveling. I was visiting clients. I was doing board presentations, and I was exhausted just from all of that, and thinking about, then bringing my second daughter into the world and having a toddler. And I just found myself wondering if there was a better way. And I also, it wasn't just wonder, but there were also things in that time that, as I climbed the ladder in my consulting career, I was exposed to all sorts of injustice, atrocities, things that I could no longer feel like I could speak to and for. And yet I had to. I was in an executive role. I had to, speak. I had to be the messenger for messages that I didn't believe in, and messages that I didn't want to send. And so in some ways, yes, I left in pursuit of something better. And I also left because I felt like I could no longer impact that system in the way that was true for me.
Mhm.
And that felt wrong. So it was also from a place of I've held and carried that responsibility for many years. And perhaps the best way to fix that or be a part of that solution is to break it all down and start
Mhm.
over in a
Mhm.
different construct. So that was really the impetus. And so when I returned back to work after I had Alice, who's now 3, um, I knew after then I have to find an exit out of here.
Yeah. So much of what you said, Diane, I know will resonate with the person that is listening to this, but it also resonated with me in two places that really stood out. The first is that it wasn't just one big moment, that it was a series of moments, right? And I think when people think about making a change in their life or change in their career, whatever it is, right? Like, am I going to go up the
Mhm,
ladder? Am I going to leave completely? And so often people get hung up on the idea that it's one big moment, one big, brave, scary thing that drives that. And just as you said, and other guests have shared this too, that it's a series of small decisions. It's a series of small moments where you're like, that doesn't sit well with me. Oh, that doesn't feel right. And then you just keep making these little shifts that then end up being this bigger shift. Um,
mhm,
but the other thing that you mentioned, Diane, that I think is, and you know, I don't want to blow up anything that you were going to share, but what I think is important about what you said was how you had to be the messenger of things that you no longer believed in. And, I just think of all the work that you and I have done together in the goodness and how many people we
mhm,
have encountered that are doing things that no longer, that just are kind of like burning a hole in their soul, right?
mhm,
And
mhm,
how you
mhm,
making the decision, a really brave and courageous decision, that I can't do this anymore. I can't, right?
mhm,
Like it's pushed
mhm,
me too far into the corner. So those were two things that
mhm,
really stood out to me that you were talking about, as you were telling a little bit about your story, that you know I've come across on my own in my own
mhm,
private experiences, but then also people that I speak and work with, as well.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, and just to take that a little bit further, I mean, I think in hindsight, like I said, it felt easy to make that choice. I think because I knew I needed it so badly to
Mm,
exit that system, that felt easier. And what's interesting, Kia, is that in hindsight, there are times that I long for some of the things that I had in that construct. Like I have
mm,
enough separation
yeah.
from that experience now to really hold not on equal value, but to really see that experience for
Mm,
what it was
mm,
and
mhm.
recognize that, it was a fertile ground for continued challenge. It was a space where I could make a lot of money, like a lot of
Mm,
money. And I
mm,
think it's
mhm.
important for women to talk about money. And I also think it's important to
Yes.
say, like, that career oftentimes is really lucrative. And in hindsight, it's like, you wonder why. Like, you put a lot, you
Mm,
sacrifice a lot. And so, what's
mhm.
interesting is thinking about like how our society values that experience and how it is so on paper lucrative and glamorous and all these
Mhm.
things, and yet at what cost? And I don't think
Yeah.
we often put the cost of that up against this
Mhm.
big paycheck, this big benefits package, this big bonus. Like, you don't often hold those things together.
Yeah.
And so for me, I can see that, I can appreciate for what it was. And I also don't seek that in the way that I did then. But it has created a different lifestyle when you make that
Yeah.
shift, into entrepreneurship away from the stability of that, of
Mhm.
any job,
Mhm.
whatever stability looks like
Mhm.
for you. And I think that um, there's just so many things to um, just see them for what they are and also recognize that um, there's always a cost. with something that is that lucrative. So I'll
Yeah.
leave it there without
Yeah.
going down that bunny
Yeah.
hole, but I think it's just an interesting thing in this world. Like, what do we value as a
Yeah.
society, and on whose backs are we valuing that, right? Because in order for
Yes.
me to make that much money for our family, the things I had to do, and the lengths I had to go to, and the other people that I had to lean on in order to do that, it's just a fascinating construct, and one that is in many cases harmful. So
Yes to all of that. And that could be a whole other podcast interview, because I mean, the systems and just the layers of that are just, it's astounding and so insidious.
Yeah.
And another thing that you just said, Diane, about the consequences of choices, right? And like the weighing the two things together. And there's a lot of courage that is required to own and acknowledge, and then own and accept the consequences that come with whatever choice, right? Like, even if it's the choice that is the best thing for you in that moment, there are still consequences associated with that. And so it just requires kind of this like full spectrum of courage on all those sides. And speaking of courage, as you know, this show is all about giving courage permission slips to ourselves, to others, etc. And so I would love to start, not that we haven't already started, but would love to dig into this with you a little bit more, Diane, of when you hear the word courage, what comes up for you? What does it mean for you?
Yeah, I of course was reflecting on this in advance, and I have two big thoughts on it. One is that the first thing that came forward is this, it's like blank in spite of blank. And it's like this idea that it's like doing, being, going, moving, in spite of whatever thing is in your way, or whatever long list of things are there, because it's often not one thing, right? We know that it's often all the things, as we say around here. And I think for me, I was reflecting on courage. So that was my first thing. And I also felt like, and wondering for myself, is courage a choice that I'm making? Is it an active choice? Like, am I actively choosing courage? Or what is my relationship to it? And so I do think that sometimes we have to choose courage. We have to choose to act in spite of our fears, or in spite of judgment from others, in spite of judgment of ourselves, like in spite of anything. And yet I also think, at least for my personal experience, I have learned a lot of my courageous acts from witnessing others who have come before me, who have just done in spite of hardship, moved in spite of judgment, acted in spite of fear. And I think that, to me, it's almost ingrained in me to just move through it, which I think in reflection is really a gift. It's also likely a privilege, both earned and practiced, but also unearned. I think that there, I don't even know that I could put my finger on where I'm demonstrating courage, because I feel it's so much inside of me. It's just the way that I grew up. It's from my childhood trauma. All of these things have contributed to me just acting in spite of some other thing. And it doesn't mean, Kia, you know this, it doesn't mean that I don't feel fear. It doesn't mean that I don't feel scared and really fucking nervous all the time. Like, it's not like I don't feel those things. I just somehow, with the support of others and the things in my life, like, move through it somehow.
So what I hear, just to take that one
Mhm.
tick down, what I hear is that, you know, it lives within you, and also the movement, the action, the choice, in spite of the thing that's on the other side, right? Like the landing zone that you're going to get to as a result of the movement or the choice is bigger, it's more important than, it is prioritized over the fear or the, you know, the
Mhm.
worry or the doubt or the, you know, kind of internal criticism, because you don't always know what you're going towards, but you're feeling like, well, the chances of that thing that I'm in search of happening or me getting close to that is better than what's going on right now or the present
Mhm.
experience that I'm having. Would you like
Yeah.
that explanation? Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, and yes, and I was actually going to say one of the things I think about in how I overcome the hardship or the fear
Mhm.
is to be in the world in a place where I feel small, where I can feel the
Mm.
bigness of everything around us because we are just us. Like we are just one individual. And for me, the most grounding thing, that I escape my environment on a regular basis in
Mhm.
pursuit of feeling small amongst nature or like you being at the ocean. There's
Mhm.
something about reminding ourselves that we have a small place in all of this that is both humbling and also empowering because then everything feels like we can take that next step. We're like a part of this
Mhm.
much bigger thing. And so whatever I'm doing is like one small step. So it doesn't feel so big to me when I feel small, right? Like,
Mm.
and there's
Mhm.
something about that. I think there's something about why many of us are drawn to God or spirituality or some
Mhm.
bigger thing.
Mhm.
There's so much of just feeling small in that I think for me personally helps me take my steps and make them a little smaller versus
Mhm.
like feeling so big.
Yeah. Yeah. Ooh, I love that. And you saying that reminds me of something that one of my coaches said to me, or, you know, when I was going through my coach training, you know, to not make ourselves too precious, right? Like when you're, you know, when you're thinking of doing something, like get outside of yourself, right? Like it's not about you. So that really aligns with what you were saying about like
Mhm.
feeling small in this big, gigantic picture mosaic that we are all a part of. And every little thing that we do has ripple effects. But to not make yourself too precious in the process of moving forward.
Mhm. Mhm.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm, love that. So, you know, you've hinted at many places where you've had to be courageous, and you know, maybe you weren't even choosing it. Like you just were like, "Well, this is what I have to do." Um, how would you say um, giving yourself permission to blank in spite of blank, how would you say that has led you to what you're doing right now or the path to get to where you are right now, or just, you know, how you're feeling about things in this moment?
Mm. Mm. Yeah, I mean, I thought, Kia, when I was reflecting, I feel like originally I'm like, oh, there's just a couple things. And then I filled up 3 full pages of
Oh my.
examples. So thank you. Thank you for the reflection opportunity because I do think that, in some ways I can't disassociate it from all of the decisions. Like I think um, there are easier choices that I make every day. Like, am I going to have regular water or sparkling water? Am I going to go
Mhm.
to bed at 7 or 8 p.m., which is very early? But it's like those choices don't really require tons of courage. But then I do think that there are a lot of places in my life where I feel like I have been healing and trying to grow and change
Mhm.
for the longest time that I can remember. And so, in many ways, um, I, for those of you that don't know my story, I grew up in Atlanta with a single mother, my sister. My father abandoned us when I was 3. And so just from a very young age, I was thrust into all sorts of things in spite of not having support, in spite of not having money, not having another parent, like all of those things. I had the opportunity and the gift and the responsibility of going first many times. And so I think I just practiced that a lot as a kid. So then when I chose to move to Portland 13 years ago, I left everything behind. I sold everything in my life and, moved out here with my car, one car full of belongings, and I think that since then, I feel like I've had to make a lot of smaller and bigger courageous choices to enable the life that I have now, which is, being in this business, working alongside folks like you and our team, having 2 kids, choosing my marriage every day. All of those choices are a part of, I think, a lot of practice as a young age, and also watching my mom persevering in spite of all the things that she could have just said. I'm not going to coach your basketball team. I'm not even going to put you in sports. I'm not going to try, she could have made so many choices to enable a different life. And she made choices, but also had better choices in some cases. And so, this is where I'm like having a hard time exactly disassociating for myself where and how I gave myself permission, because I do feel like it was just part of who I was given my life experience. And I still, even in my adult life now, feel like I'm able to more courageously show up and make harder choices because of all of that practice.
And I think, Diane, the key word there that you mentioned is practice, but also choosing, right? Because it's not like you make this decision. So for instance, when you said you choose your marriage, it's not like you make this decision like, okay, I'm married now, everything's great. Like every day you have to work at it, right? Every day you have to make the choice. Am I going to blow this up? Or am I going to be kind in this moment, right? Because there are consequences to either choice, right? Or when you're thinking about, continuing to show up in your business, right? Like we've talked about how hard entrepreneurship is and how hard we are on ourselves, especially us like type A perfectionist overachievers, how hard we are on ourselves, and how each and every day you have to choose, okay, I'm not going to throw in the towel yet. I'm not going to throw in the towel yet. This is really hard. This sucks. This could ruin everything, right? And these are muscles and choices and practices that you have to work on each and every day. So, with you saying that it's hard for you to disassociate yourself from it, I think that it's just important to say that you're making the choice to continue showing up. And while maybe it doesn't feel courageous or doesn't feel like you're giving yourself permission, it's just kind of like given, right? Because you're deciding, okay, I'm not going to throw in the towel yet, when it could be so easy to do so.
Yeah. And Kia, it's so interesting because I was thinking about, in prep for this conversation, the relationship of choosing courage and its relationship to burnout. And I was wondering about like where is the line of like continuing to choose and persevere and push through in spite of, and when does it just need to not be? When do you need to rest? When do we need to rest? When do we need something different? And when does that cycle need to be interrupted in a way that like, I can't always be courageous, resilient, adaptive, blah, 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 every single day. Like that's exhausting too. So there's also something interesting about like, for me, recognizing when I've reached an edge of like, this season needs to be different. Like I'm going to be courageous in choosing my rest, or I'm going to be courageous in choosing just being versus
Yeah.
doing, right?
Yeah.
Because you
Yep.
and I are both wired to do and to push and
Yes.
to just
Yes.
dig in. And it's like, that's also why we're both so tired all the time, you know? So
Yes.
I'm curious if that's come forward in any of the other conversations, but the relationship of those things seems hard to pull apart too,
Yeah.
in a way.
Um, I love that you call that out of where is the line. And I think and each person has a different endpoint, right? Or each season, each different season for each person, you're going to have a different endpoint. And this has come up in other conversations, and one in particular where um, someone was talking about how they were the queen of burnout. It was Claire Wasserman. She was talking about how she
Yeah,
was the
yeah.
queen of burnout and how she really had to look at and make a choice of, I'm going to rest now. And
Hmm.
thinking through, okay, well, if I rest, these are the things that could happen. But if I keep pushing through, these are the things that are going to happen. So it really goes back to what we were talking about of like, assessing the consequences for each choice, right?
Hmm.
But the
Hmm.
other part that I don't think people talk about enough, which you and I certainly have talked about, is, you're paying attention to the consequences, but also being willing to having the courage to listen to your own body. I mean, we discount the messages that our body sends us
Hmm.
all the time. So,
Hmm.
the insomnia, right? Like you joked
Yeah,
about going to bed at 7 or 8 o'clock at night. The other night, I went to bed at 8 o'clock because I'm like, I just can't do it anymore. I cannot stand this day one more
yeah,
minute, right?
yeah.
And so it's listening to our bodies also. I mean, there's data upon data that says our body sends more messages to our brain than our brain sends to the rest of our bodies. So, I mean, there's infinite
Hmm.
wisdom within our like physical beings that
Hmm.
so many people step over until it's
Hmm.
too late, right? Like until they're
Yeah,
like on their way to the emergency room or in the
yeah,
hospital, because it's like, so that's why my shoulders were at my ears nonstop, right? So
yeah, yes.
that's the other part of deciding what the line is what is your body
Hmm.
consistently telling you? Like once or twice, fine. But if it's consistent and chronic, that's where you're like,
Yeah,
okay, as you said, this has to be different now. This
yeah,
this can't
yeah,
keep happening. So what new decision do I have to make?
yes, yes, yes,
Mm,
yes, yes, yes.
yeah, I so love that you reflected that back of like, where's the line? Because there has to be a line, right? Like, and
Hmm.
you have to
Hmm.
be
Hmm.
and not be afraid to draw that line in the sand or in the concrete, whatever it is.
Yep, yep.
So, and we've kind of danced around this, but you know, making courageous moves is just within you. But are there any places right now, Diane, or any moments where you can identify any fears that are coming up for you right now, or that are just like, kind of whispering in your ear that are like, Diane, listen to
I
us.
yeah. Oh my gosh. When you said whispering, I was like, you mean yelling? Like maybe yelling
or
in my
that,
ear?
or that a whisper can escalate
Yeah,
to a yell pretty
I
quickly.
know. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, I think when I zoom out from myself, I think that um, every day, I think the weight of all of the things that we're navigating, the continued pandemic challenges, um, the social and racial injustices and
Mhm,
inequities that are rampant still, even despite
mhm,
all of the things that have started to shift, like
mhm,
those are everywhere. Um, I think the division in this country, like just there is so much tension in this world.
mhm.
Climate change. I mean, I could go on, Kia, about the things that I am
Of
like, there are
course.
some mega, mega big fears that I have not faced, acknowledged, named, really
Mhm,
sat with. Um, more than I am right now. Like I feel the weight of that right now. I think as many of us probably do. And I think as I come in a little bit, like in the proximity of my influence in the world right now, I think that the responsibility and commitment to building a company and a workplace that truly is solving some of the, or is a part of solving one small piece of solving those bigger challenges right now. There are days when that feels paralyzing because there's not a paradigm, there's not some sort of blueprint or answer that we can all point to. We're all kind of like fumbling in the dark. And yet I'm grateful that we're starting those changes. And I feel like we're a part of a much bigger movement around the future of work and life and people and how those things all come together. I feel more hope there, but I also feel sometimes really stuck just because there isn't a defined way. And so we are charting that. And inherently, I love that. But, and I'll say but instead of and, like I love charting new things, but I also feel the weight of that in a different way than I think I would have a decade ago, just given all of the things I mentioned at the beginning and wanting to do it in a way that's truly creating change and not just perpetuating a lot of the norms and the paradigms that aren't working. So I think a lot about, and I spend much of my waking hours processing my role in the business space and my team and all of that, and how we're advising our clients and customers. And then I would say the other big fear that's occupying my body is just raising kids right now and navigating parenting amidst all of that too. So I feel like I'm kind of consistently juggling those two big responsibilities and feeling like I always wonder, am I doing enough? And you know, am I doing this right? I mean, I am such a person that wants to really be creating positive change, and I am just learning how to sit with, like, I may not see that in my lifetime. I may not see that fully come to fruition. And I'm learning to be patient with that for myself, but also just know that I'm a part of this much bigger tidal wave. And so it's not about me. It's back to that point of like being small, right? Like I am doing the best I can. And I say that to my kids every day. I am trying the best I can today. I'm doing the best I can and just showing up in that energy as much as I can. Otherwise, the weight of it all becomes a little bit paralyzing. So yes, those are some bigger fears that are showing up for me in this moment.
You talking about the social injustice and the racial injustice that we're all confronted with right now. And and this person that I'm going to mention, you and I both know her, Katie Osberger. And I remember we were at an event together where we were talking about this, and it was like, what do we do? We're paralyzed. And she said something that was so brilliant. And it's the reminder that we are just on the transition team. This is not going to get solved in our lifetime. And just from my own personal perspective, and I don't think that anyone would disagree with me, is that, the summer of 2020 was like the big like awakening for people that are not Black. Right. I mean, like it was the big awakening. And so there was all this movement and momentum, and it was dominating all the headlines. And there was progress that was made just in terms of the conversations and how companies were like making statements, some authentic, some performative. And so how that shifted. But now we're a year and a half out from that, and it feels like it's like summer 2020 was a big gigantic waste. I mean, that's what it feels like. And
Mm-hmm.
so, by Katie saying like we're on a transition team and that we're not going to see this solved in our lifetime, what we're seeing and experiencing right now is that example, case in point, is that
Mm-hmm.
we're going to take 5 steps forward, then we're going to take 15 steps backwards, then we're going to take 2 steps forward. And it
Mm-hmm.
is, to your point, it is that like self-management of, okay, what can I do? And also what we were talking about earlier, of like, okay, let me not make myself too precious, right? Like, let me bring my
Yeah.
ego back
Mm-hmm.
down to earth of like, what
Mm-hmm.
are the little things that I can do in the time that I'm still here to advance this forward, right? To,
Mm-hmm.
be
Mm-hmm.
part of the steps forward as opposed to the steps backwards. Um,
Yeah.
but something else that you said, Diane, about like raising children in this time. And like for me, I mean, I don't have kids. That's not what I want. But I think about my friends who are parents, and this feels like such a terrifying time to be
Mm-hmm.
raising kids,
Mm-hmm.
bringing kids into this world. And so I'm curious, for you to talk a little bit more about
Mm-hmm.
how you like deal with that, right? Like, I love that you said that you're
Mm-hmm.
telling the girls, I'm doing the best that I can, but how do you, as a parent,
Mm-hmm.
and you and your spouse, like, how do you manage that of like bringing up these young ladies and making them like responsible, like well-adjusted people in the world, and still navigating the atrocities that
Mm-hmm.
we still
Mm-hmm.
experience?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it's going to be lifelong work. Yeah, I mean, this is one of those spaces where I think for many of us, like we're thrust into choose parenthood. Some of us choose it, some of us are thrust
Mhm.
in, some of us it's a mix of those things. And I think that there is also no playbook for parenting, and
Mhm.
particularly in this time. And so one of my biggest philosophies around parenting has been really relying on my support system and finding and creating a new support system so that I
Mhm.
am not the only one and
Mhm.
my husband and I are not the only ones
Yeah.
influencing our kids, because
Yeah.
we're bringing with us all of our lived experiences and
Mhm.
traumas and
Mhm.
biases and all of that.
Mhm.
And so I think one of the things has been just surrounding our kids and our family with other people, whether it be family members, neighbors, their school, nannies and babysitters, my sister. You sort of
Mhm.
put together a mosaic of people that you hope can help you carry that weight, because otherwise it is really lonely. And I think that we, decades and decades ago, we used to all live together, cohabitate with these other generations. And I think we've all kind of lost that a little bit
Mhm.
in the midst
Mhm.
of the very individualist culture in this
Yes.
country. And
Yeah.
I think one of the silver linings of the pandemic was, and still is, bringing people back together so they can co-care for their parents
Mhm.
and their kids and themselves in a way
Mhm.
that, my mom came and has lived with us, as you know, many
Yeah.
times over the course
Yeah.
of the pandemic to really help support our family. And
Mhm.
what a gift that's been, just in the midst of bringing more support. So I think bringing support in is one. Um, Two, I think it's just particularly with my girls, having different conversations than the
Mhm.
ones that I had or the
Yeah.
ones that I remember having as a
Mhm.
kid. And I bring a lot of our conversations from the workplace actually back
Mhm.
into my home,
Mm.
just like I
Mhm.
bring conversations at home into work.
True.
I think,
True.
we have been talking a lot about topics that normally I wouldn't talk about. I wasn't like taught to talk about with my kids, whether it be
Right.
race or body image or
Mhm.
color of our skin and choices we make about our bodies, in a
Mhm.
way that raising two girls, it's just been really, I wish I had had some of those conversations as a kid. And so
Sure.
I'm just doing the best I can to bring new conversations into our home in a way that I hope sticks with them and I
Mhm.
see
Mhm.
things come through in my older daughter, Evelyn, who's 6. And, she talks about, she has a corner of her room that is her business corner. And she has it all set up for her business, right? She has sticky notes and a little laptop and her Sharpies. And she goes to her business corner every morning and she checks in
God.
with her company, right?
Oh my
And
God.
she also said to me the other day, she's like, I'm going to make an investment in this thing because I don't have a business. So I don't need to put money into my business. I'm going to invest. Like, just even her
Oh,
acknowledging that, like,
wow.
building a business is an
Mm,
investment, and by
mm,
spending money on our business, on my business right now, we can't make other choices in our life because we're investing in this
mm.
company. And it's like, she gets it. She hears that. I mean,
Wow.
she hears it. And some of it I'm sure is parroting, but I just wish that some of those conversations would have happened before for me. So
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
hope that I'm bringing new
Yeah.
conversations in.
Yeah. Um, so I am completely on board with that, because I too wish that I had conversations like that in my household growing up, because I was taught that you go to high school, you graduate, you go to college, and then whatever you get your degree in, that's what you work in for your entire career, and it better be something that you can make money in. That was the programming that I grew up with. And it wasn't until, and you've heard me tell this story, it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
until I was, God, I don't know, like late 20s, sitting at happy hour with my dad, and he said, in short, maybe it's time for you to start your own business. And I was like, what do you mean start my own business? Like, tell me, what is this? Tell me more. And the takeaway from that is I did not know I had options. I did not know
Mm-hmm.
that. And so I love that at 6, even if she is parroting, it's still her little subconscious is soaking that up. And so even if she is parroting, it is still in her mind that, oh, I could do this, I could do that, you know, or any other multitude of things. But I think it is so important for kids growing up and young adults, to understand that there is more than one way to have a life that is fulfilling and satisfying and abundant. And abundant doesn't just look like money, right? Abundant can look
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of different things. But I
Mm-hmm.
I love so much that little Miss Evelyn is, even if it's playtime, that's in her brain, because that's not something that I would say most of us, I think it's a little different
Mm-hmm.
now, but
Mm-hmm.
most of us did not have those conversations growing up. And
Mm-hmm.
then that's why
Mm-hmm.
people get to 40 and are in the
Yeah.
hospital like, I got to make a change, right? Because they're thinking, okay, I've got to like work my little fingers to a nub in this path that,
Mm-hmm.
oh, by the way, I don't really love. It doesn't fit who I am, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to keep doing
Yeah.
it because I think is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yes. Yes. Mm.
So
Mm.
important. So we've covered a wide
Mm-hmm.
range of really important gems, Diane, and insights and reflections for people to have. But there is someone who is listening to this or watching this that has a goal, has a vision, has an idea that they have been wanting to take action on, but they haven't, or they are planning not to, because the fear is more important than the the blank, right, than the positive outcome. What
Mm-hmm.
is your guidance for that person who has that dream, that goal, that vision, but they're not taking action because the fear is too big?
Mm. Well, I have 3 thoughts about things I do when I find myself there. And I mentioned one earlier, which was to go somewhere where you feel small, help yourself
Mm,
feel small. And that might be physically going somewhere,
Mhm.
or it might just be reminding yourself of some bigger power, some bigger thing that
Mhm.
is important to you. Um, so that's my first one, is just like remind yourself of um, where you are and how small we all are in the
Mhm.
context of everything
Mhm.
else. And that often also reminds me of the people that have come before me and sort of helps
Mhm.
me feel grounded in just
Mhm.
like this bigger collective.
Mhm.
The second thing is that, and we talked a little bit about this earlier, but oftentimes the resistance or the fear is showing up inside our physical body somewhere. And so usually when I'm feeling stuck, I either do something nourishing for my physical body,
Mhm.
whether that's move or drink a cup of water, rest, take a bath, dry brush. Like, I don't know what that looks like for you, but some sort of physical nourishment. And often in that process, you will identify where that resistance is coming from. Like
Mhm.
for me, a lot of
Mhm.
times it's coming, like I feel it in my heart,
Mhm.
which means
Mhm.
that something's like out of alignment, or I feel it in my gut, which means like
Mhm.
I need to listen more. So wherever you feel it in your physical body, something needs to shift there. So identifying where it's coming from and then
Mhm.
doing something about that. Um, and then third, I try to do a lot of journaling or even audio processing about like, why does this thing matter to me?
Mm.
Why does this goal even matter, either to me or the people that I'm doing it for? Um, and even if it's just one line, just that reconnection to your purpose behind doing this thing often is enough for me to just be like, okay, Diane, just move on, you know? And while I said
Mm.
earlier that I don't
Mhm.
actively find myself in these moments, it's because these practices are things that I'm cultivating every single day. And
Yeah.
so, um, yeah, getting small, identifying where your body is holding
Mhm.
resistance, and then
Mhm.
reconnecting to why the goal matters is often enough for me to move through it and then at least take one
Mhm.
micro step towards that goal.
Mhm. Mhm. Um, you identifying the checking in on why the goal is important. I just want to like amplify that a little bit more because, and we've talked about this also today, is that
Mhm.
so often people are just moving towards something, taking action on something because they feel like it's what they should do, right? So, right
Mhm.
now,
Yeah.
entrepreneurs are really like having their moment, right? Like multi hyphenate
Yeah.
lifestyle has been having a moment for a few years thanks to Instagram, right? With all these like
Yeah.
Insta like influencers and
Yeah.
billionaires, but we're not going to go there totally.
No.
But there is this feeling and people are like, oh, I should have my own business. Oh, I should be an influencer, or like, whatever the like title du
Mhm.
jour or the job du jour,
Mhm.
and connecting with the root of that, right? Connecting with the why is this important? Why do I want to do this? Is it because it's something that is truly important to me? Or is it because it's important to someone else? Right? Like, is it
Mhm.
someone else's
Mhm.
dream that I've just like adopted because I couldn't
Yeah.
hear my own voice, or like the
Yes.
resistances in my body was too strong? So I
Mhm.
really, really love that you called that out, Diane, as one of the steps to move forward, because if your why is important enough, if it's strong enough, then that is the I'm going to do blank in spite of blank, right? Because
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
why is so important, right? Like it won't leave you alone. And so I so appreciate that
Mm.
you called that in kind of
Mm.
like the waterfall of steps, because that is, all of those are so important to being able to move forward on that thing that is
Mhm.
important to you, that, is calling you and has your name on it. So thank you for that.
Mm. Mm. Yeah.
Well, Diane, I have as I knew I would. I have enjoyed our conversation so much. I mean, this could be like a 3-hour conversation, but we
Yeah.
won't do that. We won't do that to you, dear listener. But so thank you. And I would love for you to share, where can people learn more about you, learn more about and connect with the Goodness Collaborative?
Awesome. Thanks, Kia. I've also loved this. I feel like we could do like a multi-part series for sure.
Yes.
Um, yeah, so I have my own personal LinkedIn profile, which has like a lot more about my history and experience beyond just the Goodness Collaborative. So I'd love to connect with people there. We also have our website, www.thegoodnesscollaborative.com. And we also have all of our social profiles like the Instagram and all the other ones. I'm really not very social media savvy, so you can't find me on any of those platforms, but you can find my business on there. So I'd love
Excellent.
to be connected with you.
Excellent. Well, and I will share all of these in the show notes so that you can connect with Diane and follow along on the Goodness Collaborative's journey, because there are some exciting things coming up. Well, again, Diane, thank you so much for this rich, robust conversation. And thank you for watching and listening. And I hope that you are taking away something that you can use and incorporate in taking steps forward to make your dreams and your goals bigger and more important than your fears. So, with
Mm.
that, thank you again, Diane. Thank you for watching and listening. And until the next time, talk to you soon.